Welcome to Taking the Tradition On. We are in series 6, and our series is Wondrous Creatures. We are going to be here for an hour of conversation and story. Um, it's not a concert as such. This is very much a conversation. Each month, I ask an eminent storyteller to come and join me, and there's always a theme, but we use that theme to dig a little bit deeper, to find out a little bit more about what their passions are as a storyteller and what makes them tick. So as always, I would like to thank my patrons who help make this possible. You are all delightful and gorgeous and wonderful. Whether you are, I know there's a few of you in tonight now, and hello to all the rest of you when you're watching a little bit later on. Um, so tonight, my guest, I am delighted as always. Obviously, I pick all my guests completely selfishly. They're all people that I want to talk to and find out more about, and to make this space to have a proper conversation. Um, but my guest tonight has been an inspiration for years and really came into her own in COVID, and some of her online shows about goddesses just really, I think, changed the course of a lot of storytelling and the discussions that we were having as storytellers. So Xanthe Gresham Knight, she just she's got one of those pedigrees. If I started telling you all the things she's done, we wouldn't have time for a conversation. She's been the storyteller in residence at Harvard University. She's just recently done more shows at the British Museum. She's been storyteller in residence at the Chelsea Physic Garden. She's got beautiful books out, and she is here, obviously the pinnacle of her career tonight, on Taking the Tradition On. So welcome, Xanthe Gresham Knight, with your beautiful banner behind you of your brand new book that is not arrived yet. I'm waiting. I'm waiting for it, and it isn't here, which I'm a bit disappointed about.
Well, I wish you were around the corner. I'd just give you a copy.
Well, it will be here in time for Christmas, and I'm sure other people, if you order it now, there's plenty of time to get your own copies. Do you want to wave one around since you've got your banner? Have you got it
Yeah.
handy?
Well, I've got it here. And just to say, I've written 30 of the stories, but the other 30 are other storytellers, usually with specialisms or a different cultural perspective. I got in trouble with the illustrator for inviting too many people, because one of the beautiful things about the book is the illustration. So there's 60 plus plants, and each plant has, she did about 3 drawings for, they didn't all get in, and then the color section as well. So Sherry Kathleen Robinson, and some of you know very well, I've worked with her for decades. So yes, it's very much a collaboration, which is a fabulous thing, and what I love doing at the moment, and why
Well,
this is a pinnacle, Amy, because that's the great thing about storytelling, is that we're on our own. It seems on stage, obviously we're conversing with the audience, but actually we've got a really great community, and people like you
yeah.
hold it together.
Well, and you, and it just looks gorgeous, your book. Now, the key question for tonight is are apples one of the plants?
Yes, yes. Yes, there's 2 stories for apple. Generally, there's one story a plant, but then sometimes there's just one that you just have to do. In fact, there's a tiny story about the introduction to Morgan Le Fay, which I might or I might not tell tonight. Um, and it was the one I tried to cut because I just got too much material. And then I woke up in the middle of the night. I thought, no, she's got to go in. And often when I'm doing a show to promote the book, I do the whole of the Morgan Le Fay piece. So obviously there's a reason why I woke up in the middle of the night thinking, I think she better go back in. Anyway.
Well, she's obviously an important character to you. I mean, not just like for, to publicize the book, but just one of those people that you've got a connection with. And so tonight, so for this series, I approached storytellers, and I went, the theme this season, I try and make it broad, so there's lots of things to choose from, but something that I'm going to find exciting and inspiring is wondrous creatures. And I've just been absolutely fascinated because I thought I was going to get Pegasus, dragons, chimera, sphinxes, and every single person so far has chosen a wondrous creature that is based on humanity, that has, you know, isn't human, is more than human in some ways and has that wonder about them, but is based on humanity. And you've chosen apple goddesses, which I absolutely love, and is not where I would have gone with wondrous creatures at all. But I'm very, very excited to talk about apple goddesses. And there was no thought in that. It was just a, I'm going to do this. Then, oh yes, 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 I am. And you could see the thought kind of happening after. So when I say wondrous creature, what is it that instantly makes you think apple goddess?
Well, actually, when you said it, I thought of Inanna because she is half human, half beast in quite a lot of the sculptures with her claws and her wings. And so she's definitely a composite. And of course, goddesses are often kind of morph into the lions, which are there. The Neolithic goddess would have had the totem of a lion and often a throne of a lion. I bandy about that word Neolithic a little bit too freely, but yeah, lions are often connected with ancient fertility goddesses, and they sit on thrones of lions. And then somehow I think they get absorbed into the representation, especially in Mesopotamia and in goddesses like Inanna. So she's sort of like half lion, half bird, half woman. But actually, when I started thinking more about it, for me, the wondrous creatures are trees, and that's been a slow progression, which I bore everybody telling about, that I was so immersed in goddesses as a kind of feminist breakout. And then the goddesses morphed into plants. As often, often goddesses will have a tree, will have a plant. And probably if you go back further than the goddesses, you go back to the plants and you just get back to nature.
Well, the very first goddess is Mother Earth.
Exactly. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So who and her body is the earth, and all of the plants and all of the life is part of her.
Yeah.
So that makes absolute sense. And what I love is that is this image of the of goddesses with claws, though. There's obviously a point, and of you've got all the goddesses with claws and lions, and then suddenly they turn into creatures that are a bit more like the Virgin Mary, who've had all of their claws pulled.
Unless you go to South America and then you get something like Sancta Muerte. So you get the bone goddess Antonatzin, who would have been the prototype for the Virgin of Guadalupe in Mexico, who has sort of like a kind of one of those kind of gargoyle sort of faces, and has got skulls of children around her waist because she's a bit of a Hecate figure. She's taking them to the light. So she's very scary, and she's got that, I love this word, but can never pronounce it, apotropaic quality of sort of like being really kind of frightening, but to scare off evil things and to be a protector. And I might, if we get time, tell my version of the story of Medusa, which is very based by that. But Sancta Muerte is really interesting because the prototype for the Virgin of Guadalupe was Tonatzin, the old goddess, and then they separated the nice bit and put her up on the hill of Tonatzin, which is the old goddess, and then but the bone goddess kind of went into the brothels and the streets and the slightly seedy markets, which was just the skeleton, a little bit about like a grim reaper figure. And what I love about Sancta Muerte is you get the impression that if you're a gangster, if you've gone bad places in life, which some of us have, then you need a dark kind of goddess who's gone dark with you to lift you up to the light. And if you've just got an airy fairy clawless goddess, you think, oh, she's not for me. She doesn't know anything about this, that, and the other. But if you go to something like Sancta Muerte and you've gone as far as death and back, then people will make offerings of tequila and cigars and all that sort of stuff, tattoo her on their arms, and yeah, because she goes deep. So I think that's what you get in those goddesses with claws.
Well, she's not a goddess I know anything about, and I'm wanting to know more. She sounds great so far. But I suppose tonight I'm going to bring it back. So because when we're recording this as well, I mean, obviously you'll be able to see it and come back to this, and I don't know when in the year you'll be watching this, but um, I've just had a bumper crop of apples this year. Um, my garden does seem to go biannually, and I have one that's a bit of a poor year. This year has been one of the best years ever. Um, I'm cheating slightly because these are bought ones with the eating ones. All these ones behind me are mine, but they're cookers. We've eaten all the eating ones because they don't last. Um, but it is just an incredible time of fertility and joy. I mean, and it's just a marvelous harvest. They smell amazing. It feels like a huge gift from the garden. And I don't know, for me, apples are one of those ones. They're what make my mouth water. I just, I smell apples and I kind of have one and I want to cut into it and suck the juice. It just it's one of those things that I do crave. So I know some goddesses that are connected with apples, but I don't think they're the same ones that you're going to be talking about. And I don't know as much about apples and goddesses with you. So, can you tell us a bit about this connection? Why, out of a book when you've got 60 plants in it, you're choosing apples, and why they have so many connections with goddesses?
Um, well, let's go straight back to Eve, shall we? Because I think really, if you go back to the Latin name for apple, it's Malus domestica, and malus also means evil. So, but in Latin, and then in the noun of the Latin noun and the Greek noun combined. I'm not a language specialist. It can just mean apple, but the two came together, apple and evil, obviously in the character of Eve. And the interesting thing about that is when you look, I mean, when you get over your rage about the patriarchal takeover in Genesis and just let it go, then you start looking at the symbols. You've got apple, tree, snake, paradise. And then we're home. We're in home territory. Most goddesses will have a connection with the snake, which connects with the Garden of Eden, and the fruit. The snake will be the claw aspect of the goddess, which is death, and the teeth and the vagina dentata into which we all go, and the vagina, creatrix from which we're all born. But snakes can poison, but that poison can also heal. Snakes shed a skin, so they stand for rebirth. They put their tail in their mouths. They're the eternal circle. So yeah, that I don't know why I'm going on about snakes, but somehow snakes connect with apples all the time because, oh yeah, of course, because the snake puts its tail in its mouth, and that is also the symbol of the seasons, the going round. And the fruit is the joyful bit, isn't it? So you have a goddess holding an apple as if to say, I'm fruitfulness, I'm bounty, I'm blessing, I'm harvest in your life. And it happens to be an apple. But if you start Googling, you realize that probably most of the trees could have been any fruit, any nice fruit, whether it's a persimmon or a pomegranate, something nice and fruity for the goddess because she's harvest. So that's why. But I think the other important reason, and I'm going to use my nice bit of knife here, and I know you probably wanted to do this, Amy, but I'm going to do
Well, do you
it.
know what? I'm just I'm surrounded by apples. I'm just desperate to eat some of it. So this gives me an excuse that I might be able to.
Yeah. So there, when you open the apple, you have the star. So a bit like you always have goddesses with claws and wings, an apple is a goddess incarnate because you've got the richness of the earth and you've got the starriness of the sky. So you've got this world and the other world combined in just a half of a fruit. So if you take a goddess like even the Virgin Mary, she's Stella Maris, star of the sea, isn't she? So she's Aphrodite, and she's Inanna, who's starry Inanna. So yeah, I think that's why apples are connected with goddesses, the fruitfulness of it.
Do you want to tell us a bit of one of your favourite goddesses?
Well, I think we've started with
We have
Inanna.
started a little bit with Eve, but because I
Yeah,
don't know, I mean, we talk as if everybody knows who Inanna is. I'm not sure they do. I mean, it's everybody sort of knows bits and pieces. I don't think many of us have got the same sort of stellar knowledge that you have.
well, I think there's quite a lot of storytellers in. I think for me, the interesting thing about Inanna is the big story is often the descent that we all like to tell of her going through the seven gates and losing everything and dying and then coming back. But I'm particularly fond of the other little story where she reclaims herself. So it's just a tiny little story, really. And it starts with Inanna falling from heaven to earth. And when she falls from heaven to earth, she bumps into an apple tree. An apple tree falls, splits, and she sees the star and she says, "Oh, look, it's a sign. I'm star of the heavens and I should also be star of the earth. I want to be the goddess of the earth as well as the heavens." And there's a snake wrapped around the tree. And he says, "First, you need the wisdom of the earth." And she says, "Oh, I don't feel very clever. How can I get the wisdom of the earth?" And the snake says, "Well, your father Enki stole it from your mother." And in one drumbeat of her heart, she remembers her father Enki, who is a god of water with long flowing hair and red fingernails. And she says, "Well, if Enki father stole, as you put it, snake, wisdom from my mother, then I'll just go and get it back again." And the snake is excited at the idea of a trip, so it slithers along the ground all the way up her body and then spirals around her head in a crown. And then all alone, she goes out into the desert. And she walks and she walks, she walks until she sees a palace in the distance, and the palace is surrounded by water. And she says to the snake, "Snake, did my father steal water as well as wisdom from my mother?" And the snake says, "Yes." But while she's looking at the palace, Enki, father, is looking at Inanna, and he says, "Oh, servants, my daughter Inanna is coming. Get some cake. She likes cake. Get some beer. I like beer." Inanna goes into the palace with her father, and they're really excited to see each other, and they jump up and down. And then she says, "Oh, Daddy, it's so lovely to see you." And he says, "Oh, daughter, so lovely to see you. You've got a lot taller." And she says, "You've got a lot wider." And then he says, "Why don't you have some food?" She says, "Okay, cake. I like cake." He says, "Well, beer. I like beer." And after they've eaten a bit and drunk a bit, Inanna says, "Daddy, do you by any chance have anything I could remember my mother by?" And Enki father says, "No, no, can't remember. Can't remember anything. No, nothing about, sorry, it's been a very long time, can't remember." She said, "Oh, never mind. Have some more beer." She pours him some more beer. And she eats a little bit more cake. But of course, the difference between cake and beer is that beer gets you drunk and cake doesn't. So after a while of pouring and drinking and eating, she says, "Are you sure there's nothing of my mother's?" And he says, "Well, maybe a little something." And he walks across the floor and he scrabbles in the ground and he pulls out a crown. He says, "What about a crown?" She says, "Oh, Daddy, I've already got a crown." And the snake, "But I'll take it anyway. Very kind of you." "Oh, she's already got a crown," he says. "Well, now let me see. What about courage?" And he pulls out these things that are called the me's, which are our wisdom embodied. So somehow he pulls out courage. And she says, "Oh, Daddy, I've come from heaven down to earth, and I've walked all the way across the desert with nothing but a snake for company. I'm already very courageous, but thanks very much. I'll take it anyway." "Oh, very courageous anyway. What about the art of the blacksmith, the power of the hero, the great above and the great below?" She said, "Father, now you're talking." "Now I'm talking. What about singing, dancing, praising, fighting, cursing, painting, singing, writing?" She says, "Yes, yes, yes, give me more. What about stone building, wood building, craft, precision, the gift of judgment, the force of decision, and sleep?" He falls fast asleep. Inanna gathers all the wisdom to her. The snake, in excitement, slithers down her body, spirals on the floor, slithers all the way up, creates the crown, and tiptoe out. And when they get out the palace, the river unwinds itself from the circumference of the building and splits a sharp arrow-like line through the desert. And then Along the river is a shell boat, cowrie shell boat. Inanna jumps into it with the snake, with the wisdom, and the boat goes off. Well, it's not so very long, maybe about 8 hours after that, that Enki father wakes up with a terrible hangover, and he sees the hole in the floor. And he calls for his beasts. He's got an earth monster and a sea monster and a sky monster. So they've got wings and claws and teeth, and they all come. So what is it? What do you want? He says, I want to go and get my wisdom back from my daughter. And so off they go, screeching and flying and scrabbling after Inanna, who has almost got to her city by now. Give back Enki's wisdom. And she says, no, I'm not going to give it back. You gave it freely. And why don't you come too? And the monsters look at her and they say, oh, you're just like your mother. And they come to her, and the clawed monster gives her claws, and the winged monster gives her wings, and the earth monster gives her muscles. And she goes into the city of Uruk. The big gates that you can see in the British Museum, the fabulous gates of Uruk, open. And as she starts to give out the wisdom to the people who are, gathering around, going, is the Queen of Heaven come down to the earth? She throws them out. She says, old people, take some courage. Young people, take some wisdom. Children, take singing and dancing and playing and fighting. And then she finds that she's able to create her own wisdom, because from the wooden boards of the boat up are coming wit, gems, jewels, stealing, drums, coal, herbs, and healing. And with the people dancing and rain falling, she sits on her throne, and now she's earned it. And she has the wings and the claws and the muscles and the snake and the apple in her hand. And she truly is Queen of Heaven and Queen of Earth. And her two rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates, still flow through the deserts of Western Asia. So that's the story of Inanna, and in this book that's just come out in paperback, that you are one of the most supportive people. It came out in COVID and didn't get a very good reception because of it just not being able to be publicised, but it's come out, and I always wanted Inanna on the front. So I think when you said to me, wondrous creatures, I instantly thought of her, because you can see her is obviously this is for 8 and up, though the stories are quite adult. You can see her claws and her wings and her snake. It's fantastic.
Well, I'm going to highly recommend that to everybody. I need to get a new copy, and when that's in paperback, I'll get one with an on in the front, because we have a copy, allegedly, but the we is very heavily not me, and my daughter has kind of nicked it, and it's in her room, and every time I want it, I can't find it, because it doesn't look pristine at all anymore. It's dog-eared and battered and much, much loved in probably the best way. There's yes, it's just a beautiful book, and I recommend it for ups as well as 8s. I love it. Elaine saying, Amy, riddle the answer to Richard's Napple. Can't remember, but includes inside the star. There's various ones. It's a little red house with a chimney tall, no window or door at all, but but a star is hidden inside my hall. There's one version. So yeah, a little red house with a chimney tall, no window or door, no, none at all, but but a star is hidden inside my hall. I bet you know probably loads as well.
No, I don't. I like that one.
It is lovely, and it is just that, and it's the whole goddess thing as well. I think about size. You have a little apple, but it's got a star inside, and the whole thing about having trees inside this tiny globe, and the way that size just isn't relevant to goddesses, and small and tall, it doesn't really matter, because you can be all things at different times and the same time. And I love that story of Inanna, and I loved it when you started telling goddess stories and kind of went on this huge goddess adventure, particularly the online goddess lounge. And it's one of those I hesitate slightly to ask because I go, what? Why are you into goddess stories, Xanthe? And to me, it's so blindingly obvious why anybody would want to be into goddess stories. But I know what my answer is, and actually, that's me assuming what your answer would be. So I'm quite interested to know what you would say, which may well be the same thing, but it might not be.
Gosh, that's quite a big question.
It is.
Um,
Sorry.
no, I love big questions. Just I've been obsessed with them for decades, and strangely, I know this isn't very helpful, but I feel that they've sort of morphed, as I said before, into nature. So that's where my obsession lies now. And I think also the interesting thing about goddesses and nature is it's all about change. And I will never forget when I went to see the goddess conference in Glastonbury. And this was right at the beginning of my goddess journey. And I was sort of, in those days, people weren't into goddesses. You just looked like a kind of hairy waistcoat, if you were talking about them obsessively, as I had started to do. And so I went to this Isis goddess conference with the whole thing about, it was all on Isis, and I was there to take the piss, to be honest, and to find some comic bits for my show about whatever I was doing. It must have been Isis. And there was I can remember this band came on. There was a kind of like a Native American woman and sort of people with drums, and it was all, and they were going, she changes and everything she touches changes. And I thought this was really hilarious and really. And so now I'm thinking that is it. That's what it's about. You get older, and they help you change. They help you um, cope with the idea of death, I suppose, and seeing that death is just another beginning. And that seems to get important as you get older. When I was younger and doing it, it was very much about establishing my voice as a female storyteller and breaking patriarchy. I was furious every time I discovered something, like, say, with Inanna and the myth of her going down the 7 levels. And then she has a line when she replaces herself with her lover Dumuzi, and he's killed instead of her. She says, "Where have they laid my husband without even a shroud?" I just thought, that's the Bible. That's the Bible. They must have nicked it. And I was furious because I was brought up with it being word for word literal. And it literally, things like that used to make me shake with rage. And it gave me a great spur to make the shows, but I don't feel that anymore. I've sort of worked through it. And now I'm interested in goddesses as a bit like plants. You get plants like alder that have got male and female flowers on one tree. The old goddess, they think, was, well, obviously had to, as the creatrix, hold male and female within her. So now we're all very interested in the concept of being intersex or non-binary. Well, the goddess holds all that. It's about thinking about. So I like the image of the caduceus with the two snakes winding around it, and the two snakes stand for everything, your everything that you need to keep in balance, whether it's this world and the other world, or whatever, or whether it's male and female, and the idea that within each person we need to keep that balance, and that establishes health, psychological health, which is also the root of physical health. So I think I'm interested in them now. I think I was quite unbalanced at the beginning. As I say, I was quite fundamentalist in my hatred of men. I wanted to write them out of all the myths. Yeah, actually, probably I was going to say not men in general, but maybe men in general, if I'm completely honest with myself. But certainly men in myth. I just don't feel that now. I feel like it's really important to find the good guys, to find what the good male is, what the good versions of the male gods are, and how they balance with the feminine. So it's, as I say, it's changed, and I'm sure it's going to change again.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I always feel like I'm trying to strike my own path and do my own thing and be individual and unique. And actually, I always find myself in the zeitgeist and discover that everybody is generally doing the same thing at the same time. And I really feel that with goddesses, actually. I mean, when I first started out storytelling and as a teenager and a young woman, I remember kind of that whole laughing at goddess people and and that thing that kind of the patriarchy and society does to you, where I was trying to live and be in that place and finding kind of jokes funny that I just now cringe to think about, and laughing at the goddessy types who singing "We all come from the goddess and to her which now I love and I understand, but at the time it was like, oh no. And I'm wanting very much to separate myself from that image because I wanted to be taken seriously. And there being a whole thing in storytelling of kind of, we're not going to wear bright waistcoats, we're not going to, we don't want to look like children's entertainers, I am not going to wear dungarees, even, and I had kind of wanted to wear those just as a teenager and a folkie. Absolutely disengaging with all of that because I wanted to be taken seriously as a storyteller. And then that thing of kind of, I think a lot of storytellers becoming academic and talking in metaphor and going, oh yes, the metaphor for this. And then I think secretly kind of actually believing in my stories much more, and definitely having a couple of experiences. Certainly one where I went up the Sniper Stones, and there was this moment when I was talking about the devil, and when the devil sits on his chair, the cloud comes down, and the Sniper Stones is a very, very weird place. I took a load of um journalists up there, and I started talking about the stories there, and the mist came down. It was like a wall. And I was telling them this story about the seven whistlers, and it's a very bad omen to hear them, because if the six brothers searching for their lost sibling, but if they ever find them, then the world will come to an end. And this long low whistle came out of the bracken, and everybody else is laughing because they think I've set it up. I knew I hadn't. And I got home and it felt like I'd been given a right kick up the bum, that I'd been entrusted with all of these stories, and and sometimes the story is just the story, and actually there's a much deeper truth in them, and they're not all in your head. They're not about metaphor. They're much more to do with the heart and the being and the soul. And when you did your online goddess lounge, it suddenly felt like a lot of people started talking about the shamans that they had been working with and the spiritual paths that they had been taking, how they've been using stories in very sacred ways, and much more respect and belief, and much less on an academic level and as a metaphors. And that's definitely sort of been the case for me. And I work with Lucy Wells, who's a plant spirit medicine practitioner and completely amazing. And the work that I've done with her, I think, has really rooted and changed my storytelling. And I wonder if that is a thing for you as well, because I think there's definitely this thing of disassociating ourselves because we didn't want to be laughed at, wanted to be taken seriously. And I think now there's been a real change in perception and how people are willing to listen to stories that are sacred, and how much you spiritually connect with what you're telling, and how much, but where is that line between faith and metaphor?
The thing is, if you're telling a story, whether it's a metaphor or not, and internalizing it, it's going to start having a power over you, whether you like it or not. So you can start off with things as a joke, but as you start connecting with them, they'll start connecting with you, and you'll start having experiences of kind of sympathetic magic. I can't think what you'd call it, but synchronicities will start happening. And I've just got one on my mind right now because Ali Querelle is in the audience, and she and Des had a fantastic spate of storytelling in an ancient, I think it was, I'm going to use that word again that I overuse, Neolithic cave. And they asked me to come and tell Isis in the cave. And it was a very early version of the Isis that I'd worked on. There came a lot more personal material after it, but this particular version was just Isis. I'd put some introduction at the beginning, but I was late. My car had broken down, and of course Des and Ali were really, really nice and said, don't worry. And when I got there were about, I don't know, 20, 30 people all lined up waiting for me. I think I was about an hour late. And so I and Nick Hennessy had done the gig, and he said, "Oh, it's really magic. You have a really amazing experience." I said, "I won't. I'm not that type. I can't imagine I'm going to have a magic experience. I'm sure it'd be nice, but Anyway, I got into the cave, and my first thought was I would never have agreed to tell in this space. Not the space, but I would have rearranged it. I would have wanted my back to the cave wall. I wouldn't have wanted a vacuous chasm behind me, which there was. And then all the audience, they'd put these little candles in little alcoves, and I could only see the candles. I couldn't see anybody else, which, as all the storytellers who are here will know, that is a bit disconcerting because we get a lot of strength and encouragement from the audience. So it was pitch black apart from these lights. And I started telling the Isis myth, and I felt like my mouth was on speed. I felt like there was, rather than normally when you're telling, you've got a space behind you, it's like you're walking against the wind. But this was the opposite. It was like a wind was pushing me. Literally, this massive force was coming out of the cave, pushing me forward. And I got out and I said, "Oh God, I'm so sorry. It was supposed to be about an hour and 15, wasn't it? It was only about 20 minutes." And I don't think it was Des or Ali said, "No, you were an hour and 20." And to me, it had felt like 20 minutes. So that was one of my spookiest experiences. And I quite like it because it's, there's lots of lovely, I'll have to tell you one, which is another one to do with Isis in a minute, which is one of my favorites. But what I like about the cave is it's such a physical experience. It's very like your Stiper Stones moment. It's like you're in a cave. Well, stones are ancient. And I'm suddenly thinking I'm a bit worried about that whistling. Did it worry you in the Stiper Stones thing? Because
Yeah,
it's not
absolutely did. But I only heard one. And I mean, it's
body.
seven. It kind of escalates in serious severity until you get to seven. So there was only one, but the timing of it was impeccable. And it just felt like a warning to me. It wasn't like an earth shattering, the world is going to end. It was absolutely it felt like the world and the land was listening to me, but also just a warning. If you're going to take our stories, if you're going to be the conduit between us and the world, don't don't mess about. Just, you need to listen, you need to take life a bit more seriously. And that doesn't mean that you can't joke, and it doesn't mean that you can't have fun. It just you need to be listening at a different layer.
Yeah, yeah. I think it goes in quite viscerally, doesn't it?
Mm. It was absolutely, yeah, it was definitely visceral is absolutely the word that it was, yeah.
Mm.
And just really interesting because you have that very visceral, as I said, experience, and you're the only one there having it, kind of certainly for me, because the people there weren't ready to experience it on that level at all. But maybe they are now, kind of we're all on that journey at different speeds and different times.
Yeah, I think it is really interesting. I mean, I suppose if I'm quite interested in Buddhist philosophy, which says that everything is inside you, so that if you become interested in a goddess, say like Tara, I'm particularly interested in Tara, she's just not just, but she is a manifestation of something inside you. So you conjure up something to trigger something that's always been there, which kind of works if we are, you know, what's that Salman Rushdie thing? If we are an ocean of stories, or the Jungian unconscious, it kind of works if we're tapped into all of humanity. It's just, it depends on your perspective. Are you looking out and saying the gods and goddesses are there, or are you looking in and saying they're there? And they end up being the same thing because the ancestors.
Absolutely. Well, that we're back to the apple and kind of the star is within and the star is without, and the size is irrelevant, and they're both the same thing.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the apple and about that. Yeah, just thinking about the apple is one of the things that has been really interesting me is the idea of something like Avalon being in parallel time, so that you have this world and then the other world, but instead of the way I was brought up, that the other world is separate to this world. The more pagan idea is that Tír na nÓg and Hesperides and Avalon are all concurrent. And I think that's really nice. In fact, I've been working with a musician, local musician, and we were having a conversation recently, and it turned out that we both knew the comedian Ken Campbell. And we'd been talking like this. And I said, oh, you know what Ken Campbell used to say? He used to say, a full stop is not an ending. It's an eternal straight line coming right at you. I just used to, and we were both going, oh, wow. I mean, it's just that kind of mind-blowing thing that you change your perspective. But going back to the apple and the apple a day keeps the doctor away and everything like that, and Avalon, the Isle of Apples, is that you need to be able to go to another land in order to heal. And that, when I was researching all the plants, that was what really fascinated me. That first off, I was going to write a children's book, and then it didn't happen, for the same publishers as Goddesses and Heroines. And I started reading it, and I was trying to do it very quickly because I had to do a sort of summary of the book. But I was reading this book called the Lacnunga, which is the 9 Herbs Charm. Very, very dense, very serious. I've probably got it up there somewhere. Anyway, it's an amazing book. It's the original texts, Anglo-Saxon and whatever, of these healing manuscripts. And I remember literally keeling over while I was reading them because they were so sad, because it was so serious. They were trying to heal people. People were dying. And so the doctor would come, and they would literally be using everything in their capacity to activate the parasympathetic nervous system. So if they're saying, I'm going to give you an apple because there's a star in it, and if you eat this, you will connect with Avalon and your ancestors, and they will give you healing, then if you can say that with enough conviction, there's every possibility that's going to be 50, if not 80% of the cure. So they say there's I was really interested in Ode, who's Wodan or Wotan, who was like a ecstatic, mad, shamanic healer before he became Odin. And they said the illness was caused by elf shot from fairyland. So when he has the 9 Herbs Charm, or those 9 runes and 9 rods that Odin gets on the tree when he hangs upside down on the ash, are actually ones that will break the bond with the bonds that the elves have bound you with, the bonds of illness. So he would say that Wotan, or whoever was being the healer and channeling Wotan, would say things like, hold a herb in front of the person and say, you, waybread, is plantain, mother of herbs, carts ran over you, bulls stamped on you, brides wept over you, you stayed strong, now stay strong and draw out the malice of this illness. And it's so moving. I mean, it's nice and it's dramatic for me to say, but when you think of the reality that these things were very, very serious in very hard times when life was short, and to conjure up a magical land worked. And so when you were talking there about the power of stories. Stories are the same. Stories do heal us. So my journey with Goddesses was never, it was always random. It's literally what hits you on the head, or the idea you get at 3 a.m. seems, obviously it's not random, and then you follow it, and then it starts working its magic. So yeah, I think they choose you, don't they? And even if you're playing with it, if you're joking with it, you're starting to engage, and it's just you're getting your toes in the water, and then
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think stories are some of the most powerful medicine that we have now. I think um with everything that is going on in the world, and the amount of talk that we talk about mental illness and mental health, and how we might have lots more medicine for our physical bodies, but we're really struggling with mental health. That's stories are the healing for that, or certainly the start and the basis of a lot of the healing for that.
yeah. Yeah, I think singing as well. Singing and stories. enchantment in general, and music, singing stories, music that soothing. I'm just suddenly thinking of it. It's David, isn't it, in the Old Testament, who I think Saul comes and plays the harp and it heals his madness. And
Oh,
that
you were talking
feeling.
about the nine herbs. It's like that we're going to the nine muses now, I think, really.
Exactly. Well, then you're going to the nine Morgans of Avalon, because that was where it all started, was working on Morgan, which was probably the last, but that she was concurrent with Bridget, the last of the big goddess shows that I did, working on Morgan, and realizing that the oldest version of Morgan was that she came from Avalon in a boat, one of 9 healing sisters. I think there's Morgan and then Morano, Matzo, Glyton and Glyton, Tyranno, Tithonia, Titon and Titan. And this is important because if you conjure these magical names, you start sounding like you know what you're talking about. You know what I mean? So it's the incantatory chant of the 9 of them. And it sounds like you need a Morgan with, I don't know, some sunflower seeds or something. And they were bringing herbs to heal Arthur, and that was it. And they take him to Avalon, and they're gone. And that's our first introduction to Morgan Le Fay. And then look what patriarchy does with her. It's like, wow. But yeah, the nine herbs, charm, the 9 Morgans, the 9 muses, and that's 3 times 3, the triple goddess, etc. Numbers, we love them.
We do, but also I love Morgan Le Fay, and I'd love to hear your Morgan Le Fay story. But I promised that we would have a Q&A at the end, and we have. It's been a bit like your cave. It feels like it's 20 minutes, but it is longer than that we have been on. So, has anybody got any questions that they are desperate to answer? The chat has been very quiet tonight, unusually, but I think everybody's just been listening, and just really enjoying listening to you, Xanthe. So this is the time to get your fingers typing quickly, if you have questions, and if you don't, then we will have hopefully maybe a little Morgan Le Fay story. Um, Elaine is saying thank you for reminding me of all this. I was immersed in this in the 80s as an exploration into the power of the feminine as an addiction to political feminism. That sounds that sounds like a conversation we need to have, Elaine, actually. That sounds that sounds like a much bigger conversation. Sally's just saying engrossed. They've all been listening. Um, yeah, Jane is voting for the story. I think everybody's like, we just want to listen, actually. I'm voting for the story, I think. I've given you the option. You weren't quick enough. Okay. Though Ali says you started with Cullen. Sorry, can't spell it. It wasn't Cullen then. It was I don't know. I'm getting confused.
Helen the
Who did we
War
start
Machine.
with? Pardon? Oh,
Well,
we started with the hair. And then moved to grandmother's. What was the spark?
okay, so Ali's talking about way before I got into goddesses. Um, I did, well, actually, that I never even thought of that, Ali. That's an amazing question. So, the Cahalan the War Machine was something that I did with Sherry. I think, I don't, perhaps you don't remember it, Amy. It was,
I
it,
do. I thought you meant tonight rather. I was thinking about tonight's conversation rather than your career.
sorry.
No, that was me. So what I
Um,
was Cullen and I was reading it right. Sorry, Ali.
yeah, but that was the real turning point, Cahalan, because I had literally taken that on because I wanted to be like a male storyteller, and I was embodying a male storyteller. I was a warrior. I had my leather waistcoat. I had short hair. I was whirling cans above my head. I was spouting poetry. I was feeling really pleased with myself, and then I had a breakdown, not to do with the Cahalan. That was great fun in a way. And then I started looking for the voice of the feminine, but it always seems quite neat. I feel I went from Cuchulainn to the goddesses, but actually all our grandmas came in between. And that was pure play. It was taking my stories of my ancestors, finding fun stories about women, putting them all together, and just having a ball. It was fantastic fun, and the publicity for it was me holding a big bowl of strawberries, and it was just stupid. But really, really enjoyable. But quite interestingly, I've been thinking about Cuchulainn quite a lot, because quite often I'll go back to it, because I worked on it for 10 years actually before I did the big split. So it was pretty good by the time I finished. And we made a CD, which is now a print sort of thing. And so it's all on record on the CD. And sometimes I think, oh, do you know, I'll go back to that. That would be a good one. I need another new show. And whenever I listen to it, it makes me so sad. I'm so grief stricken and full of tears that I think, I don't know how I told it, because it's like the saddest story. And it's, especially if you look at what's happening in the world today with war and the sadness and the, how they're all individuals out there fighting with their individual stories and dying and terrible things. Cuchulainn leans against a pillar right at the end when he's being taunted, I think, by one of his first lovers, and he's pushing his insides in, leaning against a pillar and still kind of fighting, and it's so desperate, and just so sad. I don't know why, but the poetry is beautiful. So yeah.
It's
Yeah.
funny, Elaine's saying, yes, yes, you don't have to be a man to have power, rule on the non-binary world. And I totally agree, Elaine. I think because that is the thing. I think as young storytellers, we were all trying to be male storytellers and fight. And when we started storytelling, it's gone vastly the other way. But there were far more male storytellers than women. I mean, all the storytellers were men when we started, weren't they? And it was, yeah, we're trying to find our feet and pushing our way into a different world. And now, sort of looking at young people, they are doing it in a very non-binary way, or being very feminine, and finding their power in a different way. And it's amazing to see. Actually, it's really heartening. It looks like it's a very different path in actually a very short time, really, in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah. No, I can't believe it. It seems like a woman's craft, really, these days.
So we
Females.
are coming up to the end of our hour, but do you know what? It's taking the tradition on. It's an Amy hour. I don't feel the need to be to the second. And although we did have a question, and although I wanted to hear all of that, the vast majority of votes were for the story. Can
It's a,
we finish with a little bit of Morgan Le Fay?
well, I think I more or less told you the Morgan Le Fay, which is simply her coming in the boat for Arthur. But I'm going to tell you a story that I really love at the moment, which is really tiny, so it won't. There's an island that floats 9 waves from the shore, like a leaf on the sea. And one time, the black-eyed, black-haired enchantress of that island said, I want to make a shining tree. And she took her bronze cauldron and filled it with spring water and the song of birds and the laughter of children and the scent of flowers, and she mixed it all up and then boiled it. And as it boiled down and down and down, there was nothing but 3 drops left. And ding, 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 they flew out of the cauldron and buried in the soil. And straight away, they took root and shoot and became 3 apple trees. And since that time, the island that floats 9 waves from the shore is called Avalon, which means the Isle of Apples. And sometimes the magicians of this world, the Merlins, go mad, and they wish that a wild wind would blow the war and the craziness away. And then they hear the voice of Cerridwen, the black-eyed, black-haired enchantress, saying, come home. And arms swing them away to Avalon. And they sit with their back against a tree and they listen to the song of the birds and inhale the scent of the blossoms. And when a ripe golden apple falls in their lap, they bite and their heart turns to honey. And in a second, they're on their feet and they say, I'm alive and I'm ready to return to the world and wassail. Oh, apple tree, we wassail thee and hope that you will bear hatfuls, capfuls, 3 bushel bagfuls, a little stash under the stairs, for to blossom well and to bear well, and merry so to be. Let's lift a cup and drink it up in praise of apple trees. Let's lift a cup and drink it up in praise of apple trees. Oops.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Xanthe.
Okay.
Thank you very much for helping to take the tradition on, to take on Apple Goddesses and to a certain extent the patriarchy in general, and for being my guest tonight. Thank you everybody for coming to listen. And we've just thank you for coming to share this beautiful space. Thank you whether you are here with us now or to whenever and wherever you are listening. We have our own little private other world here where we can all come in from different times and spaces and step into that other world for a short time. So don't forget that, I mean, there's a lovely banner behind Xanthe. So her new book is out, which is just a treasure trove and a delight. And Goddesses and Heroines has been out for a little bit longer, but is standing the test of time, and it feels just as fresh. They're very old goddesses in a new book, and it is a beautiful treasure to have. So just get both. Just get both. And I'll put up the links on YouTube and into the Facebook event. Lots of people saying, giving you lots of love, Xanthe. Everybody just really enjoying listening. Elaine, particularly from the from Somerset and the land of apples. Well, we're giving you a bit of a run for your money up here in the Welsh borders, I have to say. Um, so thank you. Is there anything else that you want to let people know is coming up or happening?
I just want to say thank you to you, Amy, for all that you're doing for the tradition and for storytelling in general. And it was a really lovely evening. So hatfuls, capfuls, bushel bagfuls to you, I say. Oh, I'm interested in these chats.
And we get big claps for Elaine as well. Oh, well, thank you. And this is the well, if you want to stay on and you're live, we'll have a little bit of a chat. You can all turn your cameras on, but for all of you watching later, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you next month on Taking the Tradition, and next year on Taking the Tradition on. The next one will be in January with a very special guest that I will be putting up very soon. Thank you and good night.